Hello, everyone. Welcome to Half-Cooked Ideas, a series of talks about thoughts you are unlikely to hear elsewhere. They will take you through the genesis of the Betweenness Model. It also contains an explanation for the origins of doubt and uncertainty, and it will introduce you to the language and convention, tampering, and meddling effects. Don't worry if you don't understand what I'm talking about. They will be explained in other talks. Enjoy, and I hope my philosophy is of value. So let's check where we stand. We finished the first segment, which is the introductory segment. The following talk falls under the second segment, which is a collection of random arguments and precursor thoughts that eventually led to development of the core fundamentals of cognition and the Betweenness model. After we finish this segment, we'll move to the formal argument segments about the core fundamentals of cognition and about the Betweenness model. The next talk is called A Law of Understanding. Spoiler alert, this is the law. Ignorance Accelerated Inflation Model or law. It's not a literal law, and I hope that my talk is not taken literally. However, the idea behind it is to shed light on the possibility that knowledge and ignorance might not be as we imagine them. This is something I note into my thought diary. Life's secrets are to minds as laser points are to curious cats, similar to an endless game of hide and seek, where the hidden remains so for the most part. It almost reminds me of a cat trying to chase after a laser, or a dog chasing after its tail. It's an endless exercise where each answer is followed by more questions, and that sort of led me to try to think about it a little bit more deeply. Intuitively, I thought as more knowledge and understanding is gained, ignorance recedes or decreases. However, this does not completely correspond to what we see, namely the endless pursuit of more knowledge and information without an end in sight. Each time we gain a point of understanding, knowledge, or answer something, there's always more questions that follow. So that made it seem as if knowledge and ignorance are governed by a more fluid dynamic instead of a rigid, conserved dynamic where there's a zero-sum relationship between the two. So I wrote the following. There is an endless quantity of ignorance that is created with every knowledge we discover, it seems. So I started thinking, what if unknowables and ignorance are not conserved and happen to behave like space in between knowables, not unlike an expanding universe where matter is being thinned out with rapid creation of unconserved space that comes from who knows where and fills more of who knows what. So for the fun of it, I describe this as the ignorance accelerated inflation model. Again, don't take it too literal, but those two things may have some resemblance to each other. Continuing the theme of having fun with the idea, we can ask the following question. Could understanding just be waiting for a Hubble of its own? Of course, Hubble was instrumental in demonstrating that the universe was not static, but rather expanding, and the stars were moving apart. So using that theme, we can say the following. In all directions, we look at the heavens of what we know. We see an astronomical number of shining points of knowledge in a sea of dark ignorance. Over the millennia, why haven't the heavens turned completely bright? Intuition tells us that we have progressed a long way in making the skies less dark. It seems safe to accept that knowledge has grown. So where does the darkness come from? Why does the darkness still persist? Why do we still have So many questions. So with that background, it might be justifiable to question the safety of assuming that ignorance is in a zero-sum relationship with knowledge, where the expansion of one is coupled with the shrinkage of the other. Now, it is not unreasonable to propose that with each shiny star of knowledge we discover, multiple questions are simultaneously created, crowding the space between points of knowledge and causing what an equivalent of redshifting for the stars might be. A shadow of doubt about realness is casted on anything that is not conserved as we understand it. Things that come from nowhere and disappear into who knows what. I think it's justifiable to question on what grounds are they based. So the realness of knowledge and ignorance is therefore debatable as we understand it today. What we discussed before relates to our collective knowledge. However, let's look at knowledge on an individual level. Let's do this thought experiment. Imagine that a research team of 22 people discovered a new piece of knowledge, and let's call that 2020 XYZ. That instantaneously means that 7.9 billion people became ignorant to 2020 XYZ. Where did all this ignorance come from? It wasn't there before the 22 people discovered it. Also, where did this new knowledge come from? Again, this just goes into the theme that knowledge and understanding and ignorance are more fluid and liquid than a lot of us intuitively think. They're not as rigid and fixed as we might imagine them to be. As all of us know, there are two sides to the story in most things in life, and space and time and knowledge and ignorance are no different. So you might have come out of the discussion before that I question the realness of things that come from nowhere and go to who knows what, and that includes space, time, knowledge, and ignorance. However, to present a more complete picture, we can ground space and time in the Noether's theorem. Of course, time is suggested to be related to energy, according to Noether's theorem, and space is suggested to be related to momentum. Both energy and momentum are conserved qualities. So those are grounds to believe that space and time are real. However, my discussion before questions the way we understand them. But there are grounds to actually acknowledge their existence. So I don't want you to go as far to suggest that I question their existence. Also, I developed the Betweenness Model, and through the Betweenness Model, it permits us to ground space and time and knowledge and ignorance as being real and exist in reality as forces of nature, according to the Betweenness Model. So I don't want to give you the impression that I believe they don't exist. They do exist. Our understanding of them, the way we think of them, might not be fully concordant with reality. How is this talk relevant? It's relevant in many ways. One of the ways it's relevant, it brings into focus the definition of knowledge. The definition of knowledge is a practical definition because absolute certain knowledge is not humanly possible. If this resembles something you might have heard in our introductory talk, you are correct. What you heard in this talk is a precursor of the first fundamental law of cognition, as stated in the introduction, which affirms the indirectness of truth and knowledge. This indirectness permits the weird observations you heard in this talk just moments ago. And it also plagues the sources of knowledge, including the ones I list in the slide, including intuition, philosophy, history, reason and logic, mathematics, and so on. The talk is also relevant in the sense that it is a precursor and argument for the second law of cognition, which states the impossibility of convention-free cognition and the impossibility of having conventions without a price. Of course, the topic of this talk is about understanding and knowledge. Its definition, or the convention that we use to outline what is knowledge and what is not. In some sense, and the difficulties we had were precursors for developing this second law. Also, the prior talk is relevant because you can see the initial seeds of the Betweenness model in the discussion. There was discomfort with the things that come from nowhere and go into who knows what, while there was a level of comfort with conserved entities that don't change. So you notice a distinction between changing things and unchanging things. And the Betweenness model, if anything, is a model that puts increased emphasis on the meaningfulness of change versus no change. Concludes our talk. Thank you for watching. If you found this interesting, please join us on other talks. And if you think this is valuable, please share with others. Bye-bye. See you later.